Here's the way they look at it. Here's their metaphor. Adam and Eve were held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, cruel, and vindictive God. Until Lucifer, through his agent Satan, set man free from this garden by giving him the gift of intellect. Through the use of intellect, man will conquer the earth, will conquer nature, and will himself become God. It's taught in every Masonic temple in this land. Every secret brotherhood, every secret society, every mystical temple, every occult organization teaches the Luciferian philosophy.
To understand the New World Order and the New Age worldview, we must go back into history and examine its origins. But first we must define our terms. By New Age, I am speaking about a worldview that has many facets and components, such as astrological and zodiacal beliefs in the New Age concept, channeling higher powers to achieve knowledge, meditation, the belief that all is one or forms of monism, the belief that we can attain godhood, esotericism, or in other words, reinterpreting ancient texts to find hidden meanings and unify all religious belief into one, the belief that we need a one-world system for the coming age of Aquarius. By New World Order, I am talking about a political agenda to create a one-world system, one-world government, one-world economy, unity of humanity into one organism, control over humanity, and submission of the masses.
But today, the largest countries of the world have agreed a global plan for recovery and reform. I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.
To understand what is going on today with respect to the New World Order and the New Age movement, we must have recourse to the 19th century organization called the Theosophical Society. This organization in particular, among others, is largely responsible for the modern New Age movement and the political doctrine known as the New World Order. The founder of this organization was a woman named Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Born August 12, 1831, Helena Blavatsky was very interested early in her life in the supernatural and the mythological. From 1848 to 1858, Blavatsky would travel the world to ascertain an understanding of the religious traditions of the world. She claimed to have traveled to South America, Egypt, Canada, France, Greece, Mexico, Tibet, India, Germany, and England during this time. It is said that during this travel she learned many mysteries, secrets, and occult knowledge from every walk of life. With all of this new esoteric information in her mind, she moved to New York in 1873. Then in 1875, she formed an occult organization called the Theosophical Society. She founded this society with two men, Colonel Henry Steele Olcott and William Quan Judge. According to Olcott, Thesophy already had thousands of members and branches all over the world by 1885. After New York, Blavatsky and Olcott established the Theosophical headquarters in India, and the membership roster grew increasingly as time went on. Blavatsky's influence came from her writings. Her first book was entitled Isis Unveiled, published in 1877. She started a magazine in 1887 called Lucifer Magazine. Her principal work, The Secret Doctrine, was then published in 1888. She then wrote The Key to Thesophy and The Voice of Silence. These works are now famous, and contained in these writings are the doctrines that helped mold the New Age movement to what it is today. It is said that part of Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine, was channeled to her through an ascended master or highly evolved being called Cthulhu, who spoke to her. Belief in these ascended masters who communicate to humanity is very crucial when studying the New Age. We will look at that doctrine later. The age concept that says humanity is leaving the age of Pisces and entering the golden era or Age of Aquarius, was popularized by Blavatsky, she taught. Theosophists, at any rate, some of them who understand the hidden meaning of the universally expected avatars, messiahs, socioshis, and Christs, know that it is no end of the world, but the consummation of the age, i.e. the close of a cycle, which is now fast approaching. Again, the messianic cycle of the man connected with Pisces. It is a cycle, historical, and not very long, but very occult, lasting about 2,155 solar years. It occurred 2,410 and 255 BC, or when the equinox entered into the sign of Ram, and again into that of Pisces. When it enters in a few years the sign of Aquarius, psychologists will have some extra work to do, and the psychic idiosyncrasies of humanity will enter on a great change. These theosophists teach that Jesus was simply a representation of the age of Pisces, and that he was an initiate into the mystery schools, or cults of spiritual teachers and masters. They teach people that the new age of Aquarius is going to be that of a utopia, where the world unites into a one-world system, the exiting out of Jesus' age, and the entering into a new world teacher's age. They say each age is accompanied by a great world teacher, be it Buddha, Jesus, etc. So for the advent of the age of Aquarius, they claim a new world teacher will guide humanity into it. Blavatsky was reluctant to fuse these theosophic beliefs with politics, however. Nonetheless, she still advocated monism and a one-world brotherhood, or uniting, of mankind. In Blavatsky's book, The Key to Theosophy, she lists three main goals of theosophy: universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, color, or creed, to promote the study of the world's religions, and to investigate the hidden mysteries of nature. As theosophy grew, it produced influential figures such as Annie Wood Besant, born October 1st, 1847. She was a Marxist and a socialist. Besant was so inclined towards socialism that she defended it in public debates. One such debate was conducted between her and a man by the name of G.W. Foote, a secularist who supported republicanism. The debate was held at the Hall of Science on February 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd, 1887, a four-night debate series. The title of the debate was, "Is Socialism Sound?" Angelique Richardson and Chris Willis from the University of London Institute for English Studies, when commenting on Besant's worldview, note, quote, "The socialist feminist Annie Besant joined the Marxist-based Social Democrat Federation, SDF, in the 1880s. Annie Besant met the founder of Theosophy, Helena Blavatsky, in 1890, and she quickly read Blavatsky's material. Besant recorded her first acquaintance with Blavatsky. She wrote, quote, "I was standing with my hand in her firm grip, and looking for the first time in this life straight into the eyes of HPB. We rose to go, and for a moment veil lifted, and two brilliant, piercing eyes met mine, and with a yearning throb in the voice, 'Oh, my dear Mrs. Besant, if you would only come with us.' I said a commonplace, polite goodbye, and turned away with some inanely courteous and evasive remark. 'Child,' she said to me long afterwards, 'your pride is terrible. You are as proud as Lucifer himself.'" Besant would get involved with the secret society known as Freemasonry. In 1902, she established the International Order of Co-Freemasonry, and then set up lodges all over the world with theosophic underpinnings. Theosophy, Freemasonry, and Marxism are all connected with the New Age movement. Besant would become president of the Theosophical Society in 1908. As I give you the history and lay the framework for the origins of the modern New World Order ideology and the New Age movement, it is important to note the role of Freemasonry. As previously noted, Theosophy and Freemasonry were somewhat affiliated in the late 19th century. In fact, Helena Blavatsky received an honorary degree of Apprentice Companion, Perfect Mistress, Sublime Elect Scotch Lady, from the Rite of Adoption. She was awarded with these titles by the 33rd degree Freemasons John Yarker, M. Kaspari, and A.D. Lowenstock. Here is a reprint of the Masonic certificate that Blavatsky received. It is a well-known fact that these same esoteric organizations have openly stated that they wish to indoctrinate the public with their esoteric religious ideas and externalize their views to humanity, eventually resulting in a new world order for the age of Aquarius, which they all await with anticipation. Let me qualify this. As Thesophy grew, it produced another prominent woman named Alice Bailey, born June 6, 1880. She is one of the most influential Theosophists, and it was her who was responsible for convincing New Agers that humanity needs to make a one-world government and one-world religion for the age of Aquarius. In order to achieve this system, she deemed it necessary to teach humanity the religion of Thesophy and Freemasonry, the same doctrines that Zeitgeist is now spreading. Speaking on the spiritual war between esotericists and people who refuse to accept the New Age, she says, quote, "It will be fought largely with mental weapons and in the world of thought. It will involve also the emotional realm from the standpoint of idealistic fanaticism. This inherent fanaticism will fight against the appearance of the coming world religion and the spread of esotericism. It must not be forgotten that only those souls who are on the probationary path, or the path of discipleship, will form the nucleus of the coming world religion. There is no question, therefore, that the work to be done in familiarizing the general public with the nature of the mysteries is of paramount importance at this time. When the Great One comes with his disciples and initiates, we shall have the restoration of the mysteries and their exoteric presentation as a consequence of the first initiation." Alice Bailey also reveals that Freemasonry is meant to produce advanced occultists and is in accord with the theosophical goals. Quote, "The Masonic movement, when it can be, divorced from politics and social end from its present paralyzing condition of inertia, will meet the need of those who can and should wield power. It is the custodian of the law, it is the home of the mysteries and the seat of initiation. It holds in its symbolism the ritual of deity, and the way of salvation is pictorially preserved in its work. The methods of deity are demonstrated in its temples, and under the all-seeing eye, the work can go forward. It is a far more occult organization than can be realized, and it's intended to be the training school for the coming advanced occultists," unquote. Alice Bailey, the prominent theosophist, stated, quote, "The new era is coming, the new ideals, the new civilization, the new modes of life, of education, of religious presentation, and of government are slowly precipitating, and nothing can stop them."
Okay, can you tell us about Benjamin Creme, Maitreya, and the Ascended Masters?
Okay, well, Benjamin Creme was born in 1922, and in 1959 he was contacted by one of the masters, Ascended Masters. They don't really get real specific who actually contacted him first, but what they did is asked him if he wanted to participate in this coming, where he would actually talk about and be kind of like the John the Baptist for the coming Maitreya, as they called him. And he accepted, and in 1975 he started Share International, which is kind of like the mouthpiece for who they call Lord Maitreya. And in 1977, Maitreya actually made, according to them, his physical appearance, where he came from the Himalayas, and supposedly he occupied a body, came in on a plane from the Himalayas, and they even used that whole thing about him coming from the Himalayas in 1977 to say that this fulfills the Bible scriptures where it said he will come in the clouds, which is such a joke. But so Maitreya has really been, or Benjamin Creme has really been, like, again, the kind of like the false version of John the Baptist for Maitreya ever since, really. He's went around, lectured. He lectures at different and various occult groups. He lectures at Masonic halls and these types of things, places where he feels comfortable at. And he's been trying to herald in Maitreya for a long time. They've made many predictions where, they said, okay, he's most likely going to appear within this time frame, and most of the time they've just got everything wrong. So they'll say, well, he could appear any moment, but we don't really know when.
The New Age religion, folks, is going to have a worldwide leader, a charismatic political and religious leader that they call Lord Maitreya. At least so far that's who they call him, or that's what they call him. This individual, as far as I know, has not made his public appearance yet, but the New Agers claim that he is on the earth at the present time. They claim that he came to live with the Asian community in East London, England, in July 1977 by descending from his ancient retreat in the Himalaya mountains along the border of India and Tibet. They further believe that his imminent emergence into full public view is assured. They also claim that this individual is the one that the Christians call Christ, the Jews call the Messiah, the Buddhists call the fifth Buddha, the Hindus call Krishna, and the Muslims call the Imam Mahdi. In other words, all of the major religions of the world are awaiting the arrival of this one individual. And they say that he is on the earth now, patiently waiting for the appointed time to reveal his existence to the peoples of the world. They say that he will apparently assume the leadership of all of these religions, and when he does, he will create a one-world religion. The New Agers have written that in the esoteric tradition, previously defined as being intended for or understood by only a chosen few as an inner group of disciples or initiates, in other words, the esoteric means hidden. They claim that the word Christ is not the name of an individual, but the name of an office or function within the spiritual hierarchy of masters. They claim that the masters are a group of perfected men who have guided human evolution from behind the scenes for centuries, and they believe that this Lord Maitreya is that Christ. Now, Manly P. Hall has written of this individual by identifying him as, quote, the way, the truth, and the life, which coming to every life redeems all who accept it, unquote.
Since Jiddu Krishnamurti, featured in Zeitgeist Addendum, failed as the world teacher responsible for ushering in the Age of Aquarius one-world system, Theosophists, Freemasons, and occultists have been waiting for their world teacher since then. Well, on January 9th, 1959, a student of Alice Bailey and Blavatsky, who was already familiar with the doctrine of the Ascended Masters, Benjamin Creme, would come into contact with powerful forces who would appoint him to introduce Maitreya, the world teacher, to humanity. Creme's first experience is as follows. On January 3rd, 1959, Creme became possessed by an energy, and a message from an outside force said to him, "Go to Blackfriars Bridge, south side, Blackheath side, on January 9th, 9:30 p.m. So on January 9th, 1959, Benjamin Creme followed these instructions and crossed Blackfriars Bridge in London, walking to the south side. There was no one about. It was deserted. There was a car waiting at the far end of the bridge. He walked beside the car and looked inside of it. There were some people in it who he did not know, but one of them was a man who told him he had been receiving messages from the Ascended Masters. From there, Creme started receiving messages again from this force, who he now believed were these Ascended Masters that Thesophy invented. This entity told Creme to pull out his tape recorder. It began giving Creme long dictations, which he repeated into the tape recorder. The entity said, "Now our master Maitreya himself has something important to tell you." Creme then claimed to be overshadowed by Maitreya, this leader of the Ascended Masters. In a sense, he was possessed by Maitreya. Creme claims that the experience was that of total identification with everything and everybody in the world, a kind of universal experience such as he had never felt. He was filled with a foreign tremendous energy. Creme claimed to have seen a vision of himself in the future, as well as Maitreya, the world teacher, who ushers in the Age of Aquarius, one world system. Later he was instructed that he would help introduce Maitreya to the world. Since then, Creme started an organization called Share International. They have a website as well. It is aimed at promoting Maitreya and the teachings of Theosophy and the New Age. Creme admitted that he was influenced by Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. Quote, To many today, this awareness includes the recognition of higher states of consciousness attained by those who make up the emerging spiritual kingdom, the masters and initiates of the world. Their existence was first revealed in modern time by H.P. Blavatsky, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, as long ago as 1875. A more detailed communication about the masters and their work was given by Alice A. Bailey between 1919 and 1949. In her book The Externalization of the Hierarchy, she revealed the existence of a planned return to physical plane work and activity by this group of enlightened men, which return, I submit, has already begun. According to Share International and the Swahili edition of the Kenya Times, Maitreya made an appearance June 11, 1988, to a local congregation in Nairobi, Kenya. The editor of the Swahili edition of the Kenya Times, a veteran journalist named Job Matungi, witnessed the event and took some pictures. A summary of his article, as it appeared in his newspaper, is as follows, quote, "The tall figure of a barefooted, white-robed, and bearded man appeared from nowhere and stood in the middle of the crowd. He was walking slowly towards the new church building, away from the tent. Mary walked with him side by side. I stared at the stranger without blinking, wafted on top of his turbaned head, his feet, and his entire body. In clear Swahili, which had no traces of accent, the strange man announced that the people of Kenya were blessed, especially those who had gathered at the venue that afternoon. We are nearing the time of the reign of heaven, but before that I shall come back and bring a bucket full of blessings for all of you," the man said. A bucket full of blessings is a reference to the astrological symbol for the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is depicted as a man carrying a pitcher of water in the zodiac. But continuing with the article, quote, "It took the crowd nearly 20 minutes to recover after the man left the meeting in a car belonging to a Mr. Gurnam Singh, who offered to give him a lift. But it will probably take Mr. Singh his lifetime to recover from the shock he got 2 minutes later. On reaching the bus terminus, the man informed Mr. Singh to stop the car. On getting out, he walked a few paces beside the road and simply vanished into thin air." New Age expert and attorney Constance Cumby, author of The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, had stumbled onto this Maitreya figure in her research in the 80s. Her book, published in 1983, was the first book to give a full expose on Maitreya and Benjamin Creme. On page 21, she notes a Denver Post interview conducted by Jack Kissling speaking to Benjamin Creme, quote, "Won't the advent of a single world religion annoy the hierarchies of all the current Orthodox religions?" I asked. "More than that," he said with a smile. "They will be shocked. I dare say they will be among the last to accept the Christ." But according to Kissling, Creme said confidently, "It will come because it must. We will begin to live," he said, "as potential gods," unquote. Wayne Peterson, a retired American diplomat and admitted supporter of Maitreya with connections to the Pentagon and the United Nations, stated the following about Mikhail Gorbachev in the White House in a Vision magazine interview, June 20th, 2000. Reporter Kendall Klug asks, "I believe Mikhail Gorbachev has publicly stated his belief of the existence of Maitreya. Do you know if this is true?" Wayne Peterson answers, "I have one little story I could tell you about Gorbachev. A friend of mine who has worked with the World Bank went to the Heads of State conference in Europe and gave a speech where he borrowed many of Maitreya's ideas for economic reform out of a book by Benjamin Creme that I had given him. He told me that he had read the book on his flight to Europe and realized that his keynote address to these world officials, especially presidents and prime ministers, it was a very high-level meeting, was going to be very boring, with many having heard similar sentiments over and over. So he thought he would throw in some of Maitreya's ideas into the speech. The country he was in had a reigning monarch who invited him to lunch the next day. When he showed up for lunch, there were 16 to 20 people there, including Mr. Gorbachev. The monarch of this country said to my friend, 'I suppose you're wondering why we invited you here today. Well, we are all curious about where you got those ideas for your speech, which you presented yesterday.' He said that my friend Wayne gave me a book written by Benjamin Creme about Maitreya's mission. Immediately they nodded their heads. 'We thought so,' was the apparent response. That's why we invited you here. We all know of Maitreya, and we're doing what we can for him. But we are not able to say anything publicly because we are world leaders. We each have our own public to deal with. Only one person there stood up and said that they could use his name to legitimize these sightings, and that was Mikhail Gorbachev. He was the only man in the room who would say, "Use my name if you want." The reporter asks, "Do you think President Clinton has had an experience with Maitreya?" Wayne Peterson: "I don't know if President Clinton has. I believe that former President Bush has. We used to have transmission meditation groups that Maitreya had asked us to do around Washington, D.C. People who were interested in Maitreya and the reappearance story would get together once a week in Georgetown, in the home of President Bush's main counselor at the White House. President Bush came over to this house for dinner one night, and the hostess was in the dining room as President Bush asked her, 'What do you think? I'm running against Clinton in this election. Am I going to win?' She said, 'No, Mr. President, you are not. Maitreya has already said that you are going to lose to Clinton.' Bush never challenged her, but merely said, 'Yeah.' He didn't ask who Maitreya was. He was very quiet, and then said, 'I think I've got to go now.' Benjamin Creme has said many times that he had heard from one of Maitreya's associates that Maitreya had appeared to Bush and that they had a discussion in the White House. So that incident with my meditation group seemed to confirm that Bush did in fact know of Maitreya. I do know people in the White House have been visited by Maitreya many times, and the people I'm talking I've seen on the front page of the Washington Post, standing next to the president.
The master of all the masters, for the first time in human history, himself physically came on a well-known television program in a major network in the United States, but undeclared as Maitreya, just as one of us.
For our last segment, we're joined by author and activist Raj Patel, who's just come out with a new book, The Value of Nothing: How to Reshape Market Society and Redefine Democracy. The title comes from Oscar Wilde, who wrote, quote, "Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing." Raj Patel's earlier book is widely considered the authoritative work on the global food crisis, called Stuffed and Starved: Markets, Power, and the Hidden Battle for the World's Food System. Raj Patel's worked at the World Bank, at the World Trade Organization, at the United Nations, has also protested them on 4 continents.
Value of nothing. And I think that we've been beguiled by markets. We understand prices, or we think that we understand what's going on when we're faced with a price. But in fact, we miss a great deal about how the economy operates if we believe in prices. And we've come to believe that the only way we can value things is by sticking them in a market. The trouble is, of course, as we've seen through this recession, that markets are a tremendously bad way of valuing things.
I prepared all my life to work for organizations that fought poverty. People within this organization are very committed to changing the world and to fighting poverty. And the benefit of this agroecological system is not just you don't need inputs, you can save the world.
Food sovereignty is a way of saying, actually, you know what, that's not okay. Food, corporations don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, they don't love, they don't need housing. It's human beings who need all these things. And human beings need to be able to control resources so that we can actually, all of us, take over the world. All of us can control the world.
I met La Via Campesina first when I was protesting in Seattle against the World Trade Organization. We were marching in the streets, and there was this beautiful sea of farmers wearing green and waving their green banners. And they represented to me the most hopeful kind of globalization. A globalization where you learn from one another. A globalization where you share. Food sovereignty is about a right to have rights over your food system. This is a very different model from what the World Bank, for example, is saying. For too long in agriculture, as well as other things, mistakes have been made by someone else, and we have to live with the consequences. We all need to get involved in shaping our food system. But that means that we have to tackle the food system at every level. Food sovereignty is about an end to all forms of violence against women. If we are interested in tackling inequalities in power, then we must tackle the violence against women not only in the household, but the violence that stops girls being educated, the violence that stops women being able to sell their goods in the market. We need to, and by redistributing so that everyone shares, equality makes everyone better off, and generosity makes us happiest. We will be happier people when we share, not when we impose, but when we learn from one another. Because when I'm connected to everyone, I disappear. There is no, in being excellent, you lose yourself.
Before the camera started rolling about the uprising in the Middle East right now, and you said this is actually related. So how is the crisis in the Middle East right now and what's going on in Egypt related to food and hunger?
Well, there are a lot of working people around the world. There is this yawning gap between the price of food and their income. And so the protests that started off in Algeria have spread, and they're in part about food and about food prices. But they're also about people empowering themselves to say, well, enough is enough. And there is something that we can do about transforming our world. Now, in Egypt, those protests have taken a certain form, but in fact, around the world, you're seeing these so-called food rebellions, right. And I think we can expect to see many more of them in 2011.
Welcome, Raj. The Value of Nothing. Why did you name it that?
Well, good morning, Amy. The reason, as you say, it comes from the Oscar Wilde quote, people today know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I think that we've been beguiled by markets. We understand...
We live in a world where there are 850 million people who are going hungry every year, and 1 billion people who are overweight. And the connection between the two is that the way we get food today is through international markets.
What is it that you highlight that is new that we haven't heard before?
Well, I mean, what I'm really trying to get at is precisely the fact that externalities
by themselves won't magically appear in prices without political change. And so what I'm doing is firstly observing the fact that even someone like Alan Greenspan admits there's something fundamentally wrong with
Nancy joins
the
us
politics
from
of free market.
San Francisco. Welcome, Raj Patel.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Very good to have you with us. What's causing this surge in food prices around the world?
Well, it's a number of factors. For a start, there were just bad harvests last year. Some people say that this is a sign that climate change is biting in our agricultural economies, and it's certainly the case that there was some very bad weather, particularly in Australia last year.
What is happening in South Africa?
Okay, so the website is Abahlali, ABAHLALI.org, and the organization is called the Abahlali Basim Jondolo, which is Zulu for people
Daily
who live in
Finance
shacks.
here with Raj Patel, the best-selling author of the book The Value of Nothing. Raj, thanks for being here today.
Good to be here.
So I just want to jump right into it. I would like you to distill the message of the book in as few sentences as you can.
Sure. I mean, the title, The Value of Nothing, comes from the Oscar Wilde line. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of
They
nothing.
do, and the trouble is that by hiding prices and hiding the real costs of the way that we consume today, we actually end up causing a great deal of environmental harm, a great deal of social destruction. The way that we consume, for example, the way that we consume food hides a lot of the environmental damage behind food. I mean, I give the
strong case for linking the reforming of our market system and market structure. You link that with redefining democracy. Help me imagine how that would work.
Well,
the latter part, the redefining democracy part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's important to realise that in many ways we don't live in a democracy. We live in a complainocracy where every 2 years, we boot out the people who have disappointed us and we elect new people who have yet to disappoint us. But that's different from democracy, and I talk in the book about ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy. Now, ancient Athens.
Brought up this book, The Value of Nothing. Well, explain the premise first, the concept here of why we are all wrong about the way we see the world.
Well, basically, Henry, the idea is that as the Wilde quote says, we know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And we think that the only way in which we can value the world is by sticking a price label on something and letting the market sort it out. But, of course, as the recession has shown recently, prices are a fairly bad way of affixing a value to anything. A twofold problem here. Well, one, of course, Secretary Vilsack is right that Americans spend far less of their income on food than almost any other developed country. But that's an intentional subsidy that's been funned towards American consumers.
And Raj Patel, the
American
Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, says we're on track to have the third largest wheat crop ever. How is it possible to have that and also have a record number of hungry people worldwide?
Well, I think this is the interesting point. I mean, there's a lot of questioning among the punditry about whether we are, in fact, back in 2008. And if you cast your mind back, just has nothing to do with what we saw in 2008.
So if you were president of the world for a day, what two things would you change?
One of the things, I mean, I certainly think that a citizen's wage is a brilliant idea because all of us have a right to food. And sadly, that right has rather been trampled on by the interests of large corporations, of powerful governments. And I mean, what we're seeing around the world, I mean, one doesn't want to sort of paint doom and gloom, though what we're seeing at the same time as we need to be sort of very clear-sighted about the kinds of things that Tom did see, is a movement that's trying to push back against these trade liberalization agreements.
I'm joined by Dr. Raj Patel, who is a political economist and author of Stuffed and Starved, Markets, Power and the Hidden Battle.
Particularly underpaid. 50% of the world's total output is unpaid women's labour. And of course this is something that matters in Australia right now. We had the figures coming out yesterday about how women in Australia are paid 70% less than men for the same work. This is something that every couple of years we boot out the people who have disappointed us and bring in people who have yet to disappoint us.
but most assuredly will.
Absolutely. But what the Zapatistas have is more akin to a kind of genuine democracy like they had in Athens, the birthplace of democracy. And the Zapatista style of democracy where you
Oggi iniziamo con un personaggio straordinario, formatosi in economia e sociologia, è conosciuto al di fuori del mondo accademico per il suo impegno sociale. Bisogna dire che il suo impegno è tutt'altro che acquiescente, quindi vi preparo già a questo. Signori, a voi, Raj Patel.
I'm here to talk about measure. So I prepared all my life to work for organizations that fought poverty. People within this organization are very committed to changing the world and to fighting poverty.
Behind that price. And that's the distance between price and ideology. That there is an ideology underwriting our system at the moment that we have tried to make natural, but with the economic crisis right now, that ideology is again coming to the surface, and it becomes easier to see in times of crisis.
Unemployment. And there are people fighting for that.
But you are asking actually for a much bigger change than just fair wages or better environmental sustainable projects, because when I read your book I actually see this compelling urge for change, real change, like a mindset change even, that we don't think of ourselves as rational actors or anything, but as human beings with altruism and all these things, and so how do you think, how is that feasible, such a change?
But I mean, the joy of it is we're more than just consumers. We are not these rational actors, this homo economicus that we are told that we must be in all the theories and in the models. We're much bigger than that. And you're already seeing, I mean, look at what's happening in the Middle East. Look at how groups are organizing to actually create different and better worlds. I mean, in the US, again, we have a lot of groups that are fighting to end hunger, but not just... It's like, have you seen the film Time Bandits? It's a Monty Python film about the universe. The universe was built in 6 days, so it was a rush job, and God had help, but he doesn't treat his workers very well. And there's one scene where the workers jump through the holes in the universe and they rob people. And they rob Napoleon.
We can't say food, the rise in the price of food caused all this, because the food price rises everywhere. But we can certainly say that they are revolutions kindling. We can say that the food price was certainly part of the process. And we've seen food rebellions in places where there hasn't been the reporting. I mean, India, I was in India at the...
An idea that began in Toronto, where 20 years ago, there was a sort of mix of people who were in government, who are activists, who are in the local school system, and they got together and they're like, how are we going to make hunger disappear from our community? Right. Not just reduce hunger, but
education levels
hunger.
And welfare levels.
They understood.
And they're examples that are being experimented more and more around the world. And so, for that reason, abandoning this idea of economic man and abandoning the kinds of ways we value things through that result in the GDP number, and moving towards other models that value the world differently, I think that actually there's a great deal to be optimistic about. The question is, how do we get from the system we're in at the moment to the one we need to go to? And that's that inevitably involves confronting some of the inequalities that we see today. That involves protest, but again, protest brings people together, and that's usually a good thing.
That's the journey. Thanks very much.
But about empowerment. To think about how in the future we're going to live in a world where everyone gets a say in how food is distributed, and so that everyone can eat well together. And there are ways of doing that right now. Why not drop a line to your local food policy council, which is a kind of space where local businesses and government and activists, youth, including you, can get together and end hunger in your community. And the way we're going to do that is not through charity, but through joint democratic empowerment.
We still don't have quite as much as we hope we might, so if you can continue to pitch in the last couple of weeks of the campaign, we'd be really grateful. But thanks so much for everything you've given us so far.
Yes, so far we can go on the trips, but we can't afford to actually eat on the trips. And given what the film's about, I think we probably need.
Because otherwise it'd just be called Generation.
Exactly. the lost generations.